record on this computer. Okay, you'll all get the little recording thing. So thank you, welcome. Thank you for all being here today. I promised Candace you wouldn't have to talk today, but I always want to start out with the fact that we are partners in crime with this. So Candace is my co-founder of this Start A Brewery mission. And I do think it's good if we kind of reiterate at the beginning of our resource groups why we're here. I think that that's kind of important to stay top of mind. Our goal is to provide an educational resource for dreamers, startups, and expanding brewers. This helps to raise the bar for savvy startups, while it also helps to lower or eliminate barriers to entry. To do this, we've created our website and invited experienced industry professionals and programs to be part of our community. Our resource groups are strengthening this community through connection and education for our contributors, while also offering brewers the opportunity to attend, learn, and bring questions for either the whole group or individuals. And again, it was super cool to hear from so many of you that you connected with each other either during or after our session last time. That's the whole idea. So thank you for taking it in spirit and connecting with each other. When we have sponsors, we'll offer a couple of minutes for an introduction at this point. But I wanted to take, since we don't have one for this round, I wanted to take a minute to make a couple of good update announcements. We do have sponsors for both of our in-person resource groups coming up. We have our next resource group is going to be April 5th, and that'll be in San Diego. That'll be right after the CCBA conference, and UC Davis is sponsoring that. Thank you, thank you. That'll be at Epig's Waterfront Beer Garden, and that'll be from 2 to 4 in the afternoon on April 5th, and that's right after the conference closes. The next in-person group is going to be May 2nd, and that'll be in Minneapolis right before CBC, right before the welcome reception from 3:30 to 5:30. And Chestnut Cambron is going to sponsor that in Jeff's hometown of Minneapolis. So appreciating that, we're going to be meeting at Lakes and Legends for that gathering. Recently, I sent an email to our contributors and asked about whether we should have an online resource group in the months that we have in-person resource groups. And the responses I got back were an overwhelming yes. And I think a large part of that is that so many of our contributors are not able to do either one of the in-person events. And so we are definitely going to have both an April and a May online resource group as well. April's is going to be April 13th, and we'll have this on the Event Hub. April 13th, same time, same channel. Misty Gordon Creative is going to do a piece about marketing in our contributor spotlight. And then on Wednesday, May 18th, we're going to talk insurance with Matt Hughes. He's going to walk us through insurance for startups. So as you know, our contributor spotlight is a 15-minute educational window during only our online resource groups. The in-person ones will be basically happy hour for contributors to learn more about what other contributors do. So I think that that's super helpful. Today's spotlight is on Jason Sleeman, and he's the Vice President of Craft Beverage Lending for United Community Bank. And during his presentation, if you have some clarification questions, feel free to hit that raise your hand button, and you can find that at the bottom of your screen where there's a little smiley face that says reactions. If you hit the reactions button there, there's an option to raise your hand. So if you have any clarification questions for Jason, just hit that hand raising. Otherwise, we'll take questions with regard to his presentation as soon as he's finished. So Jason, the stage is all yours.
Thanks, Laura. So today was an interesting day to start this and talk about financing, just because of the fact that just a couple of minutes ago, I got kind of a breakdown of the Fed meeting, and I'm sure it's something that's on everyone's mind. So if you don't already know, they raised the Fed rate by 0.25%. There was only one opposing vote, and he wanted to raise it by 0.5%. So, clearly the Fed is saying that we need to raise the rates. One of the other interesting parts about this is when they had originally released some insights in December, there was indication that they would raise the rate 3 times this year and 3 times next year. So this would have been the first of 3 raises. Based on the notes that came out of this meeting, they're now expecting to raise the Fed rate 6 times this year and 4 times next year. So we will be looking at a total of 10 raises through 2022 and 2023. So a lot more, higher than I think people thought it was going to be. And why I think that's important is, tying that into, Start A Brewery and in our industries. Most, I would say 99%, probably 99.5% of all brewery startups are SBA loans, right? So, there's a lot of alternative funding that has come, on the scene. It's one of the things that is becoming kind of hot, right? The crowdsourcing, the debt note sharing, some of those kind of things have become hot. But if you're going to go and talk about, traditional bank funding, that is traditionally an SBA loan. And what part of why that is, an interesting point is the index that SBA lending is off the prime rate. So as we continue to adjust these a quarter of a point or half a point or whatever, each one of these, it will affect all of these breweries, startups that we're working with, because every time that rate goes up a quarter, there is some pricing that will influence the SBA lending. And so, one of the things that becomes a little bit interesting is the way that SBA prices things. It is prime plus a margin, right? That's how the banks all price it. And the SBA sets up what the maximum is, which is prime plus 275. Now, banks have discretion to come down from that, but the SBA will not allow anybody to charge more than prime plus 275. And clearly, it is risk-based pricing. So the riskier the deal, the higher you are to the maximum pricing. And so, if as Fed goes, even if the margin, it will become very competitive in how, deals are priced, just partly because every quarter of a point that prime goes up changes potentially a quarter of a point on the end. So, you'll have to look and see, what will happen is, banks potentially, if they really want a deal, will have to drop the margin that they're having, a quarter point or half point, or they'll do something to make up for each one of these Fed rates. But there's only so much they're going to do. They're not going to price it in prime plus zero, because then the bank doesn't really have the margin. So what you'll see is inevitably this is going to push the cost of funds up. Even if banks get competitive, if we raise the rate 10 times over the next 2 years, it's just going to naturally have to push rates up. And clearly, that is going to be one of the other struggles that starting breweries are going to have to find. So, I was kind of looking at, what are some of the other challenges and how do we, really go through that right now, as I look around, there's a lot of people that, I work with, as we go through these projects. And one of the biggest things right now is time and how long it takes for a deal to get done. I'm telling people now that if you want to close your deal in 2022, you should have started last month, right? Because deals are taking 6 to 9 to 12 months to get done. And what will also be key is the bank that the rate that the bank will quote you, they won't fix that until they get to the closing table. So if it takes you 6 or 9 months, the rate may inevitably raise 2 or 3 times just because it's taking a while to get those other pieces. And so something just to kind of think about is whatever we can do as contributors to speed the process up is going to potentially save our clients money, kind of across the board. I would also say that the other factor, and hopefully the raising rates will maybe benefit this some, but we're really seeing, ballooning costs just across the board, right? Construction. One of the things that inherently happens is, especially on the startup side, is I'll get a brewery who will be interested in starting something, and we'll issue them a term sheet off of what their estimated construction is, what their estimated equipment purchase package is, what their estimated architectural fees are, off their estimated, what their wastewater fees are. We do that, right? And I had 2 cases this week. One where they had estimated, they thought that their construction and FF&E was going to be somewhere around $500,000 when they were all said and done. When they actually got the contracts and everything drawn up, it was closer to $965,000. So the thing that is a little bit hard about that is we're seeing a lot of costs. And so we're almost inherently having to go back and approve deals twice. I tell people that I'm trying to not approve them 3 times, but just do it twice, right? We do it one time off of your best guess. And then I really need everyone to kind of work and put together and come and get the solid numbers. So when we go back the second time, we can really kind of say, okay, we've got firm numbers to do that. And time right now on financing is our biggest enemy, right? Because, it's, there's some guys that we work with that are pretty tied to real estate, and they're saying that some projects are raising 40% every month, right? Between real estate costs and construction costs and everything, as you look at that. And so, not to get too deep in the weeds, but that's part of why the quantitative easing is stopped and the interest rates are going up, is to hopefully start pushing some of those additional costs down. And hopefully it'll be a balancing act, right? You may have a higher interest rate, but if you can save $200,000 in construction costs and equipment costs and everything else, there's a little bit of a balancing act there. I kind of talked earlier about that, mostly what we work with are SBA. And so I'll kind of just give you, ballparks of the way SBA works, right? So, general terms, when you look at an SBA, are really divided in, the length of a loan is really divided into kind of two major categories. What helps determine the length of the loan? The first is if you don't have real estate. The second is if you do have real estate. And so not having real estate pretty much is going to cap your loan at a 10-year fully amortizing loan. So when you look at it, equipment, leasehold, working capital, those kind of things, if you don't have real estate that you own, that's going to be a 10-year loan. If you have real estate combined, it starts becoming a percentage game. So if the real estate is the majority of the loan, let's say it's 75% of the loan is real estate, you can get up to 25 years. If it's kind of a mixture, it may be 18 years or 19 years. It becomes kind of a sliding scale as you go. And so, what you're seeing a lot of is putting kind of a construction period to maybe 12 months to build or build out, and then a fully amortizing term somewhere between 10 and 25 years based on the use of the fund. So, understanding that is really important. What we get a lot of times is someone with an equipment saying, hey, I need 20 years on equipment. The one thing that I would love is for equipment manufacturers to say, yep, the useful life is 20 years, and we could do that. But most of them don't issue that statement. So we kind of have to go for the useful life of 10. So that's something to think about. The other thing is, just kind of talking a little about pricing, right? I kind of talked about the fact that it's an index off of Wall Street Journal Prime. But traditionally, most of that is variable pricing, right? And part of the reason it's variable pricing is most banks sell their SBA loans out to the investor market, and it's more marketable as a variable loan. So, there is fixed rate pricing, but the thing that you're going to see most of the time is variable pricing, kind of across the board. Over the last couple of years, that's actually been very helpful for owners who have had those variable loans, because they may have gotten it in 2018 or 2019, and the rate has gone down from like 7% or something like that. If it was fixed, it stayed. If it was variable, it floated down. Now with the fact that it's going to go up, it's probably going to hurt them a little bit. And so kind of understanding, what are your options of fixed versus variable. The other thing that I would tell you is, we lend anywhere in the lower 48 states, right? So right now, Alaska and Hawaii are not, things we're doing. And what I would tell you is, each region of the country has really kind of seen their recovery and what they're doing very differently. So, I would definitely say you could kind of look at Northwest, Southwest, the center of the country, the Southeast and the Northeast, and each one have really, started to kind of recover in different areas. I'm very fortunate to be in the Southeast, where we're seeing a lot of breweries really start to kind of pick up and move. We're seeing a little bit less of that kind of the Northeast side of what's going on. And I think where, we see, the startups, and we see that is an indication of how they feel like the, other breweries are in their area, right? So we're seeing a lot of failures. They're not seeing a lot of startups, but, in some of these more open states, you're seeing a lot of startups. I mean, you're seeing a lot of startups in Georgia and Florida and North Carolina and, South Carolina, Tennessee, kind of all across there, you're seeing a lot of startups. One of the other things, just kind of from an education standpoint, really just to kind of talk about is personal guarantees. So one of the things that all startup owners really want to separate themselves from is the personal guarantee. They're like, I want to do this deal, and I don't want to put my house on it. I don't want to put my name on it. I don't want to do that kind of stuff. And I pretty quickly tell them that this isn't for them, right? Because, when you're a startup, there is no way to separate yourself as an individual from your business. You are the business for the very early on. I tell people, and this sounds very morbid, if you get hit by a bus, your business goes away. Until you can get hit by a bus and your business thrives without you, you can't get rid of your personal guarantee. And so you've really got to be able to have that tie in there. And so early going, until it's really kind of, got a lot of shareholders, it's kind of got very defined rules. If you're, as the owner are the brewer and the front of house manager and the CFO and everything else, the personal guarantees and all of those kind of items are definitely attached to it. So that seems to be the kind of the number one sticking point for a lot of brewery owners in the startup is they don't want to have that personal guarantee. And so sometimes it is very intrusive, and other times it's not. It depends on how much collateral you have, how much investors you have, and so each deal is a little different on that. But everyone should just be prepared to have that personal guarantee and trying to provide as much collateral that you can have, because that is a requirement of the SBA. The two requirements are if you own more than 20% of the brewery, they require you to do that. And then the other part that I always seem to quote all the time is that SBA requires us to take all available collateral until we are made fully whole. And so we can talk more about airballs if you really want offline, but just something to note is if I was going to summarize what you should be talking to breweries about, our rates are going up, costs are in time are definitely up. And so, if they're going to do it, they need to make sure that they're in full feet if they've got 20% or more ownership in their company. So that's my part. So, happy to answer any questions, but that's kind of a quick summary on financing.
Did you read us?
I did. Unmute.
Okay. I have a question, Jason. Are you seeing more stringent requirements in terms of like better credit or any of that kind of stuff for applicants because of the uncertainty of the pandemic in business?
So if you were going to describe it into pre-March of 2020 and post-March of 2020, I would definitely say that it has gotten more difficult to secure the funding prior to that. And I think, there's some other things, just, what's your experience, right? The hobbyist home brewer is a little bit more risky than someone who has been in the industry. And I tell people, now that we've, crested well over 9,000, breweries in the country, it's a conversation that I have with them that's a little different, right? If someone says, hey, I haven't, we were at a workshop the other day, and someone mentioned that they were going to quit their job, and we were talking to them and said, well, you should go, quit your job and go work for a brewery for a little while. And they said, well, I can't do without the income. And I'm like, well, then you can't quit your job because the brewery is not going to generate income for a while. So, I think there's a lot sharper discussions that are happening, and the right breweries are still getting the funding that they need, but ones that may not have been as well thought out are struggling a little bit to get that financing.
Gotcha. And I know that one of the Achilles heels can be partners that don't have great credit. Are you seeing fewer partners or more partners to try to spread the work out amongst? Is there any trend there?
So it's been kind of interesting because, I think it may not be anything the breweries are doing, but there's a lot less investors that are interested in investing in a brewery right now. I just read a couple articles where they were talking about, brewery investors are treating breweries a lot more like real businesses now, and they're expecting their returns earlier. They're, expecting things where before they just wanted to, sit at a bar and have a pint, and they were okay with not ever getting their money back. It's a little bit changed. So we're seeing smaller pools of investors, but better quality investors. So a lot less $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 friends, and a lot more $50,000, $100,000 investors that are looking for a return on investment.
So I just need a clarification of that. So the better investor is the one who wants their money back. I prefer the investor who wants to sit at the bar and have a beer. Just speaking for my brewery owner clients.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. It's changed. Those investors were great, but they also all thought, at least in interactions I've had with those, they all thought that they were going to be investing in the next brewery that was going to be sold to InBev, and they were going to cash out their part of the 30 or 40 million down the road. And I think as that has become less and less, they're thinking, hey, I need my solid 4 or 5% return, and then eventually get my money back before I retire.
Do you want to call on
Oh, John.
John?
Yep.
I'm just curious, do you see a priority or a preference in terms of investors for brewing industry experience versus small business ownership experience?
You're saying from the bank's perspective?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I'm definitely going to straddle the fence here. I would say it's a little bit of both, but I would always give priority to having industry experience, because having business experience doesn't always translate to being able to brew great beer and have front of house experience. So, I've had it before where a guy ran a landscaping business. It's great, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the industry. So I think the industry knowledge trumps the business experience, especially with groups like this out here, where there's people like Julie who can help with marketing, and Doug who can help with valuation. And, I see Jeff over there with, the legal side of it. Right. And so like, we can, sorry, I was looking, it says Laura on yours there, Candace, sorry. And so, there's all these great people who can, support what you don't know, but there's not a lot of beer brewers that are going to support what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Stephen, did you want to contribute, ask a question?
Yeah, hey everybody. First of all, thanks so much for doing this. It's my first time. So nice to meet you guys. And I just so appreciative that it's such a collaborative industry to learn from. So I'm looking to start a brewery and kind of just not just getting started, but really seriously trying to get all these ducks in a row. And my question, Jason, is, I'm still learning about the SBA process, and my understanding is that if you have real estate associated with it, like you said, there's different terms, but also you get a lot more money if you have real estate tied to that, right? My initial thing was, well, I'm going to have to lease first because I can't afford to open a brewery and buy a building. But then it appears as if, well, the SBA is going to give me significantly more money. Maybe I should buy the building, and long-term that's good for me as well. So I guess if you could just speak to that a little bit, like what is the maximum you can get from the SBA without having a building ownership? And how does that play into, if at all, to, I thought I couldn't afford to buy the building, maybe I should lease, and kind of that equation.
Yeah, so there's a couple factors that I would tell you fit in there. So the SBA has a maximum limit, regardless if you have real estate or not, at $5 million. So you can have $5 million in exposure to the SBA. Now, you're starting to get kind of tricky with, there's a program called the 504, or there's the SBA Green program. So if you have a completely certified green program, you can actually get it like 14, 15 million, right? So they have but it's a very specialty tool. Most breweries are not doing that. But if you're using solar panels and you're using those kind of things, they will help you fund that additional part. But really the balancing act in my mind are two things, right? Because as you make the loan larger, you have to come up with more equity, right? Because your equity gets married to the loan amount. So even if you're going from a $500,000 brewery to a $2 million brewery, the amount that you come in, substantially steps up. The balancing act, though, is taking your lease payments plus your loan payments. Are you better off purchasing, with that longer amortization? Are you better off leasing, right? So sometimes people will get in and someone really wants them to be there, and they'll give them 12 months of no loan requirements, and then they'll give them like a really low step up. And we've got guys that are in 8,000, 9,000 square feet that are paying $2,000 a month. You can't do that on a loan, right? But you can look and say, hey, look, I'm going to be in this really interesting area, and my loan plus lease is, I don't know, I'm going to use random numbers, 10,000, and I can buy it on a 20-year amortization for 9. And so then you look and say, okay, it makes sense, even with the increased amount, to spread it out over that term, because you can have the ownership. And one of the things that we're starting to see is people having to go find a new place at the end of their maturity because the landlord won't renew their term. That's the other thing that becomes interesting in owning your own spot is, you're not going to move unless you want to move. The landlord's not going to dictate whether or not you move after 10 years or 15 years. You can say, hey, look, we're here. And then getting really technical, you can raise different investors in your real estate holding company versus your brewery too. So you can separate some of that, and you can have investors that are looking at it from a real estate play and some investors looking at it from a brewery play, and you can have investors in both levels of your organization.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Cool. Mendy, what you got?
Well, I was just gonna say, to piggyback on what Jason was saying, you know, left hand, we've owned our property, and in fact, bought additional property adjacent to our original property over the course of our 28 years. And it's been a tremendous advantage. You know, there's the flexibility that you have in terms of developing or expanding your business. There is also the value that resides in the real estate, which is huge. So, you know, depending on your location, you know, you look down the road, you know, you're just starting and your vision is you want to be a brewery, but, you know, that may not always be the case. And so the real estate ownership may also kind of be a hedge against what may be coming down the road, which is, you know, always uncertain in terms of your business. So that's just my 5 cents.
Yeah, and the thought too is any great neighborhood brewery is going to raise the property values around them after a couple of years. So you want to capture that, right? It's like,
yeah.
Cool. Anybody
And I
else have? Go ahead.
I also
Go, Karen.
I'd like to pitch in that you're in a business where you have some pretty heavy equipment to move and a production process that is difficult to interrupt when your lease is up and your landlord goes, "You're killing it, I'm going to triple your rent." So it's very nice to be your own landlord if you can at all figure out how to make that happen. It's not like you're just moving, you know, a bunch of t-shirts across the street or whatever.
Yeah, if you can do it, it's great. You know, where I am in Georgia, it's very hard right now. There's not a lot to buy, so all these breweries are having to lease. So you're going to have to deal. You're going to have to look, and you know, there's a lot more factors than that. But like everyone said, if you can own your real estate, and then later you can, you know, you sell a brewery and you sell a real estate, it is a much bigger windfall than just selling your brewery.
I have a question, actually, Jason. From your perspective, I know from the legal perspective, it's always better to put, or at least, so I've been told, because I'm not a real estate attorney, but that you would put the land or the building into one company separate from the brewery, which would be a different company, because you don't want to lose the land if you're going to lose the brewery. But from your perspective, it sounds like one company needs to own both.
Nope. So the way we typically see it, and I'll tell you that we're agnostic on how you structure this. So you can have everything held in one company. But what we see the majority of the time is having a holding company and an operating company. The way we get around you separating those is we just have both of them guarantee the loan. So you keep the legal structure and you keep the liability structure and all those kind of things separated, but we have them both guaranteed. So if in your example, the brewery fails, we still have the real estate to you know, take care of that failure. But if you later on decide you want to put an investor in one piece of the company or the other, it doesn't really affect us. And later on, we see it. I've seen it, I don't know, a half dozen times where someone sells the brewery and then becomes in the landlord business. So they keep the brewery, they keep the real estate. They're now the landlord for the brewery, and they sold their piece of it out. So they're still generating income, collecting income, and they're no longer operating.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else have some questions for Jason or comments? Anybody else who's in that zone? Jeff, you have anything you want to add to that?
I don't. I think Candace and Jason summed it up perfectly. I do real estate stuff, so what Jason said is we just do a corporate guarantee from the operating entity to cover when you've got the holding company. I always tell clients, make sure you separate out. I'm one of those that wants to separate out the real estate. Because I said, especially with dram shop liability, you don't want real estate put at risk for that kind of liability. So separate it out and do a, but make sure you have to do a pass-through lease between the two entities too, just enough to pass mortgage, taxes, and insurance from the, from the operating entity to the holding company too. You have to have the paper trail.
One of the things that I learned from Dustin through the workshops was that more space was maybe better for expansion, even if you keep the size of the system more realistic. Jason, is there any sort of parameter when you're looking for financing that the bank says, well, that's too much space, or is it just purely on creditworthiness?
Yeah, so we don't really have an issue where, let's say you start in, I'm just going to use numbers. You start in 5,000, but you've got 10,000 in the building. One thing that people do is, this now we're getting into advanced financing, right? But let's say you take up 51%. So in that case of a 10,000 square foot building, you can put up a demising wall, or I think that's the right word, Dustin, you'll have to correct me, right? But you put a wall in to separate it, and then you can lease out the other 49% until you're ready for it for storage, your neighbor, a pizza shop, whatever you want. If you think it's going to take 5 or 10 years for you to do that, you can turn that into, revenue generating income there too. Or you can just go in and say, hey, look, we're going to size the system a certain place. We're going to run the glycol lines, down here. That happens very often where, the brewery will not have, their full line of tanks and all that. And you can see that there's, 1,000 square feet for the cooler to expand, or, put in, more rows, and you'll see the glycol piping, kind of running through where the future expansion are. But it's just open, dry storage space at the initial concept. So we don't have a problem with that.
Cool. Dustin, any 2 cents on that?
Yeah, we typically design the cellar to be built up for their max capacity, but where we see them needing additional space typically is in the dry and cold storage, because those needs just grow as their production grows, and with kind of the change in the model to more packaging, that storage space grows as your distribution model gets more aggressive.
Cool. All right, any more questions for Jason? Okay, well, let's open it up a little bit. I know last time in our resource group, we started doing introductions, and so I didn't get to everybody. So if you're a contributor and you did not get to introduce yourself last time and you would like to, please raise your hand. Brewers joining us, if you would like to introduce yourselves and or have a question, if you would like to raise your hand, we can work through and everybody get an opportunity. We have about 20 minutes left, and it would be nice to meet everybody who's interested in introducing themselves. Cricket.
All the hands. Bueller.
Okay, well, I do. Oh, there we go, Stephen.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So I'm in New Jersey, and I'm not a brewer, but I've worked in restaurants for about 7 years, and I work in restaurant technology now. I worked in some of the best bars out there, and so I'm hoping to open a taproom focused brewery, about a 10-barrel system, and really just focus on the taproom and leverage all my experience of bartending and customer service to basically, have that, level, which I think, frankly, you don't see at enough, tap rooms that are almost operate as like coffee shops. So you walk up, you get a beer, and it's not really a bar experience. So eventually I have to obviously hire a brewer, but I'm really looking for all the resources. So that's why I'm here, basically. And so, I really appreciate everybody. And I don't know what the best mechanism is for me to connect with some of these folks. I could leave my email in the chat, or maybe you guys could speak to that, but I definitely hope to do that.
You're welcome to leave your email address in the chat. There's also our contributors list. Everybody that's a contributor has their contact information on the contributors list page on our website, and you're welcome to reach out to people specifically that way as well.
Okay.
We're happy to have you. This is future, current, everybody who's interested in owning a business in a brewery. So it doesn't need to be just brewers.
And
You
is
can
this, I know it's being recorded. Is this gonna be on like YouTube or something or?
Mhm. We have a
Okay.
YouTube channel, and
Okay.
actually at the end, one of the things I was going to ask everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we're starting to add more things to that.
Okay, great.
So awesome. John, you got something?
Yeah, so I have an issue actually.
Uh-oh.
Well, it's we just started our in-person, first time in 2 years, Master Brewer Certificate Program. So this is a course that runs 15 weeks. It's intensive. They're meeting Monday through Friday, 6 hours a day. My issue is that 1 week before the program started, we had the unexpected departure of our engineering instructor. And so they were covering about 25 to 30 hours worth of material. Now, I'd already had a desire to revamp our engineering curriculum and make it a little more focused on applications rather than the theory. But anyway, I've got a number of people that I'm getting to come in and give guest lectures on some of the topics. But if there's anyone here who is interested in contributing, or if you know of anyone who might have some kind of expertise in brewery engineering, I'll leave my email address in the chat. Would love to have anyone come on, give guest lectures. We can do in person, we can do virtual. We have a Zoom equipped classroom. So we can actually have all the students sitting in the classroom, and then you zoom in on the TVs in the front of the class. So it's at least somewhat similar to giving a real lecture.
Yourself.
Oh, sorry. That sounds good. We're all using the keyboard here. So John, if anybody wants to contribute or present, should they contact you directly? You'll put your email address in the chat there.
Yeah, you can contact me directly. That'd be great. Here's my email address right here.
Okay. Super cool. Ashley, thank you for the intro. I'm sorry that you have a cold and feel horrible. Do you have any questions you'd like to submit to the group, or anybody of any particular specialty that you're looking to hear from? You don't have, go ahead.
I'm gonna try, but I don't know if you can hear me.
We can.
Okay, just kind of observing right now. I look forward to the next event, and I'm just taking notes, but no particular questions at the moment.
I appreciate you being here. Anybody else attending that would like to introduce themselves or talk about their project? Danny? Can't hear you. You're muted.
There we go. Quick introduction. My name is Danny Wong. Along with Emily Wong, we have a craft beer laboratory here in Colorado called Firmly. Pretty unique way for smaller breweries, startups to kind of access the ability of having frankly, a macro level laboratory, quality control, consulting, things like that, and process and that kind of thing, a little bit of engineering as well, kind of for that kind of service for basically any small brewery out there. So interestingly enough, we're looking at starting our own brewery project as well. So just we can offer to help out in any way possible, whether it's design, consulting. We've done stuff with equipment as well in the past. So kind of expanding what we're doing a little bit outside of the QC space, kind of leaning on our expertise of having owned a few breweries in the past and kind of see how we can help everybody out in the industry.
Cool. Okay, well, I do have a contingency plan in case there weren't enough people who wanted to talk. For contributors who have already introduced themselves last week, I wonder if we can go around. What's your most frequently asked question in your specific specialty? So maybe I'll just popcorn. Ben, what do you see as the most frequently asked question in your universe?
I'm gonna go with, what are your minimums? We get that one. we get that one a lot, or possibly what are your turnaround times? Everything seems to be, everyone needs what they need right now, and they want to spend as little as possible. But we're always trying to work with our clients to get them what they need at a price that works, and we'll figure it out with them. So on to next.
Well, are you seeing some of the same delays in some of your pieces and parts, or are you pretty good at this point?
The delays really for us tend to revolve around demand for handles. So whenever it seems that always ebb and flow, right? So supply chain delays haven't been terrible for us recently. Those seem to have gotten, for the most part, resolved. But also, you never know. Sometimes one of the things that we need are just happen to be back ordered. So you never know. So always, I would say advice for breweries is just pad your estimated timelines, right? If you think you're going to need tap handles or really anything in a month, 2 months, add a month onto that just to be safe. Don't get yourself into trouble where you're needing handles and you can't sell beer because you don't have a handle. Like, don't get yourself into that position, and just make sure you have plenty.
Add time, add money. Dustin, are you seeing the same advice in your world?
Yeah, pretty much everything's taking tremendously longer and more expensive. Just with the way the economy is, with the way the building departments are, they're chronically delayed, hard to get a hold of and get answers from, and construction cost and supply chain is a big problem on every project.
Gotcha. If you had to pick a most frequently asked question, what would yours be?
How much room do I need, and how much is it going to cost to build it?
Yeah, that's one mashed up question.
Depending on what, there's a lot of details that go into answering that question.
Yeah, no doubt. Julie, if you had to pick a question, come on.
I'm only giggling because there's so many questions. What's funny is that Ashley and I were at the same conference last week, and I too came back with a cold. So pretty sure there was somebody in there that was spreading germies that shouldn't have done that. But it's not COVID. That's the good news. So let's see. Okay. I'm trying to think of the big ones that stand out. Probably, I don't know. People always ask me for these like magic bullet solutions for like sales and digital marketing, and how do I get my distributor to sell more beer? And I'm like, there's not like one thing, So I guess like my rebuttal to that would be like, know that every strategy is different. You know what I mean? For every brand, like every brand is different. There's not like one like benchmark thing that you could do for digital marketing or sales or distribution that's going to it's like a, round peg in a square hole, right? Like it's not going to fit everywhere for everybody. So just be open to the ideas. Like you can't like poll a bunch of people. Like Andrew's so nice. He has this big group of people that like ask questions, but there's not like one specific answer for like retail sales or digital marketing tactics or distribution expansion, working better with distribution reps, things like that, that it's going to have to be tailored to what your brand needs and also tailored to your audience that you're trying to reach. So,
yeah. Andrew, you want to take that segue?
Yeah, I would love it. Thanks, Julie, for the shout out. So a question we see a lot in craft beer professional is how do I get fill in the blank for free? I think that's something we see a lot, which is a little humorous, but a real question. I'm wearing my secret hopper hat with so many staffing challenges right now in the brewing industry. I have a lot of taproom managers reach out asking, how can I best motivate my staff? And I've found a lot of times they don't ask their staff what motivates them, whether it's, a pizza party, getting extra beer, just going out and doing something fun together, or a gold star on the wall. But that's a question I have a lot. I think it's extremely important one to answer and to motivate your staff in the current state of the world and forever.
Free beer is never the answer. This, as the lawyer, or as one of the lawyers here, free beer is never the answer.
You want to do the most frequently asked question?
My currently most frequently asked question, which actually kind of tags along with Dustin and Ben, is how long it's going to take to get their licensing. And I don't know about the other states. The feds are moving speedily along, but California is easily almost the longest it's ever been that I've dealt with in 12, 13 years. So I think they laid off a bunch of people during COVID and haven't brought them back. So, and just my experience with some of the other states has not been that different, especially Texas and their new horrible system that doesn't seem to work.
Excellent. So surprising.
Yeah, shocker.
I know. Jeff, what's your most frequently asked question?
I don't know if it's a question, but the most frequent issue is when you work, and Candace, you've probably been through this too, when you work with a new brewery that comes in with a business plan and a name, and they've built the business plan around this whole name, and there's a whole narrative, and they've done their own trademark search, and they think it's clean because there's no other breweries that that have that name, so they think they're good to go, and then you send your paralegal out and you find out, hey, there's a winery that's using your name, you can't use it. It's that issue of explaining to people that, you know, you got to be careful if there's other, you know, alcoholic beverage manufacturers or NA beverage manufacturers or food manufacturers. Stay away from the names. You're probably going to run into an expensive fight with the trademark office. And it's a hard conversation when you get some people. I've had some that they keep the name simply as the legal name and pick out a new DBA just because they're so emotionally wedded to what they came up with, even though they can't use the story anymore. So that's probably the biggest one that when we have to be, when I have to be Mr. No, that's the most difficult discussion I have to have with them.
Jeff, there's a conference I have spoken at the last few years, and I do a trademark presentation, and inevitably they all come up individually and go, this is the name I have, what do you think? And my nickname is now the Dream Killer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, you can't use that. Like, look, a little test search. No, sorry. Yeah, it's not good.
Bud, what's your most frequently asked question? Are you looking for silver bullets too?
From our side, yeah, silver bullets. What's my out of stock rate? What's my overstock rate at my wholesalers?
What does Bud do?
Yeah, distribution. So you want to give a quick overview of what you do?
Yeah, so I work with a company called GP Analytics, and we provide a data platform called Craft Portal, where we actually show your data, your sales data, to wholesalers and help you as a brewer plan out your inventory from a DOI perspective. So how much overstock do I have at my wholesalers so I'm not letting my beer get old and stale, and how much understock or out of stocks do I have where I might be losing sales, losing placements, losing tap handles at wholesalers.
Gotcha. Super cool. How about you, Val? What's the brewing most frequently asked question?
I would say for any small business in general, anybody that it's in planning stages, it all comes down to the how much, right? So oftentimes, people see insurance in general, not just life insurance, but insurance in general. It's a big piece of an expense per se. So what I always try to kind of pivot the conversation is to say, is the how would you feel, right? How would you feel if an employee or a partner or an investor is to pass away all of a sudden, you don't have any coverage for them, right? At the end of the day, life insurance is one that always pays out. You're always going to have the death benefit paid out, right? General liability, sometimes you have to prove, you have to come up with multiple pieces of paper. So people just don't understand the value, and they get kind of caught up in that dollar sign amount, opposed to understand the longevity of the business and be able to, do a gesture that maybe it's something that will keep the employees around for longer, because now they have an added value to their package of their employment.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Carol, when you're talking to startups, what do you hear most often?
Well, I was thinking of just in the tap room, what I hear most often that has surprised me. But gosh, when we're talking to startups, the most common question seems to be, how do you decide what model to do? And that depends on so many things, like your location, what else is around you, what you're able to do, what your expertise is versus who you're bringing on board with you. So yeah, so it's kind of an unsatisfying answer in that it depends, but we're always happy to talk with someone at length about what they're dreaming about doing, and then then either brainstorming with them or giving our viewpoint on what they should do. We do say that we're going to start a therapy group that is, what you should do, because beer is such a an eminently relatable product that every single person knows how you should run your tap room. So just get ready to hear what all you should do. Even if you've already thought of those things and discarded them for one reason or another, people will be happy to tell you what you should be doing.
Agreed.
So we try
Agreed.
not to say that even when people are asking for advice, because really the answer is it depends.
Well, and I've heard it depends a lot this week. Julie, that was your lawyer answer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It depends. Doug, do you have a frequently asked question that your breweries come in with?
Not so much from the Start A Brewery standpoint, but it really boils down to, do I really need a valuation of my business? And to which I respond, you always want to be planning, you always want to be prepared, always want to be growing, you always want to be protecting. And if you don't know what you're protecting, if you don't know what you're growing to, and have a standard for valuation, it's really hard to do that planning and determine what's important. So that's my standard answer to them. And I also have always don't ever do these things too, but that's another story.
Maybe that's another question for another resource group. Maybe that's our next round. Well, let's start to wrap up here for today. I have one ask for all of you. If you would go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, that would be super helpful. Doug, thanks for mentioning that as a suggestion. I did it myself to see what you needed to do to get there. And you have to look up Start A Brewery LLC. If you just do Start A Brewery, you get a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't always end up with us, which is ridiculous, but I understand. So if you search for Start A Brewery LLC, you'll find us and can subscribe to our channel. We have last month's resource group on there, plus our initial rollout fun Zoom that we did. And we're looking forward to being in person in San Diego. So that is the next resource group.
Or you can get to it by going to the event hub page on the website and at the bottom.
Or you can just click the link that Val just shared. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So
I would never have been able to type this.
San Diego. Yes, exactly. Well, I tried that. So San Diego, we're going to be at EPIG. We're going to be there right after the conference closes. Candace is going to be the go-to person, so keep an eye out for Candace. We will have a home-based table that you can drop your business cards on, and we'll have a nice sponsorship sign for UC Davis. That's just a 2-hour networking. So brewers, brewery owners come ask questions, meet our contributors. Contributors come meet each other, have a beer. Very informal, very fun, just kind of a connection opportunity. I will stay on for a few minutes for those of you who might be having conversations directly. So it's not going to abort in 2 minutes. But thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any suggestions for our resource groups, questions you think we should cover, any ideas, like Doug said, hey, you should have people subscribe to your YouTube channel, open to all those suggestions. So feel free to send me any feedback, and we'll be updating. I don't know if Misty did it while we were talking or not.
She did.
We're updating the event hub with the new online resource groups for April and May as well. And we'll have those posted so that you can sign up for those. We'll have the sign up available as soon as the previous one closes, but you can get stuff on your calendar just with the information that's at the event hub. So thank you. We wish you an awesome afternoon. Please stay in touch with each other and with us. And have a great evening. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I read all your message notifications while we were in that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Usually they just say, done. I can see myself there. I'm thinking, I gotta give Jason crap for that.
Done. Give Jason crap for what?
Calling out Jeff and not me.
Oh.
Just because it's fun.
The whole page is updated. The finance page is updated. I was wanting to have this new updates because what we saw was people were going
to this
to the site.
Because that's because they wanted to know how. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. The link at the bottom for you.
So I'm like the direct link, and I'm like writing it. I'm looking at Candace. I'm like, you're not going.
So I tried that. And I went to the YouTube graphic and went there, and it takes us inside to the two locations, but it didn't give me a subscribe option. So that's why I went out to Google, and it
Directly.
I could get to the videos that way, but I couldn't click subscribe.
Subscribe up in the right hand corner. Or it'll be grayed out and it'll say subscribe. So you can't subscribe because you're already subscribed.
Okay, maybe it's because I'm the one that set it up.
That's
I
how
wasn't
it's-
getting.
I just subscribed to it. And I used the direct link, so, because I thought maybe I could shoot it to her, but then I couldn't. I'm like, she's not on her computer, you're on yours, and that's too much to try to get an email while you're trying to manage. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, no, I pulled the link, like I pulled up the link from the site and copied that, put that into the browser, went straight to Start A Brewery.
Right. Well, I know I can get there. I just couldn't get a.
And there's a red subscribe button in the upper right hand corner, but once you do push subscribe, it grays out and it says subscribed.
Well, here, I'll show you what I was seeing. I should close this. So.
Yeah, it's still have it just.
So when I go.
Or it'll say subscribe right now because I'm not signed in anymore.
Well, you can come see what I'm looking at. So there's nothing here, but it's just because it's me.
Oh, I think it is you. Okay, so
I
have exactly the same thing.
And it looks different.
Well, I have exactly the same thing,
right?
Except I have this instead.
Well, because
you manage,
so you can subscribe because you own it.
Well, right. So what I did was I went back out. I went to home, like out of my world, and tried to Google and see. And I couldn't get it to do that thing.
I put in the direct link, that crazy, like written down thing that we have shared, right? So I put that in direct and it brings straight to this page, but you should be able to do Start A Brewery.
See, she can
with
subscribe.
spaces, comma LLC. And I am subscribed, but I'm not signed in. Right. So if I sign into YouTube, then
it comes up as
right.
If you're already subscribed, you can't subscribe again.
Yeah. So here's John Stewart.
Well, you can, but then it'll make you create a new YouTube user thing, or they'll say you already exist, you know, that kind of thing. So if that makes sense. Poor Emily.
Oh, I didn't stop recording.
That